Hello Rayclast, welcome to the Path of Exile build guide for my Shield Crush Raider in the Crucible League. As usual, you'll find a Path of Building link in the video description that you can browse at your leisure if you want to check out all the details of this character's item and skill tree and everything after you watch this video. Or if you're an expert and all you need is a POB and you don't need the video information, then you can just go ahead and go there. But regardless, if you like the video, I would ask that you give a thumbs up and leave a comment, and if you want to see more like this, even though I don't upload very often, be sure to subscribe and turn on that notification bell. So, I will go ahead and say that this is by a wide margin the strongest build I have ever played, and that is largely thanks to things from the Crucible, well, pretty much entirely thanks to special mods from the Crucible. So if that goes away in the future, this build won't be playable, so I encourage you to go ahead and try it now if it is something that you think looks interesting. I only have about 35 divines invested into this character. I know that sounds like a lot to some. I probably shouldn't use words like only for that, but considering the level of strength, I think it's suitable to say I only have about 35 divines into this character, though your mileage may vary on that quite a bit depending on what it takes you to make the kind of shield that you need. I have killed all content in the game on this character, done all the Ubers, and as well as Wave 30 Simulacrum, and some deep delving and deep delve bosses. Not super deep, around depth 400, but that's where I am so far. Delve is where I've made most of my currency this league, and it has been very, very smooth. This is also the first time I've ever reached level 97, which I did by grinding fully juiced breaches and abysses in particular. Abyss gives really nice XP if you fully juice all the nodes. I think I only died one time from level 94 to 97, no, 2 times actually, and it was both at the end of a very juiced up feared fight. Just some silly deaths on the last boss in the fight. I'll throw that fight in at the end of the video and you'll see what I'm talking about. But no deaths like all the way from 94 to 97 while mapping, doing fully juiced breached and abyss, deep delving, doing all of my other boss rotations and boss kills and everything to fully fill out my Atlas and get all my Atlas points. So it is a very stable and safe build, very smooth mapper, and you shouldn't be dying at all. And I was even doing lots of full charged Crucibles, which are probably some of the deadliest things in the game right now. Still no deaths. So that being said, I'll let the rest of this Minotaur map play out. This is Juiced Essence and fully juiced Metamorph you're seeing in the background as well. I've switched to that to do my mapping a little faster now that I don't really care about XP anymore, and I'm working on some Crucible stuff for the next build. So I'll see you in the hideout in a few seconds, and I will do my best to try and explain all you need to know about this build.
Slow me down.
Alright guys, welcome to the hideout. We will try and run you through everything you need to know about this character and try not to take too long doing it. So, first things first, the meat of the build, the things from Crucible that enable it. Emperor's Vigilance has always been a very powerful unique shield for Shield Crush and Spectral Shield Throw. However, you may notice that this one has 840 energy shield, which is enabled by the Crucible. Emperor's Vigilance has this massive 1000% increased armor and energy shield roll, meaning if you add any flat armor or energy shield through a Crucible tree, it's going to get a lot of extra energy shield. So, you want to try and get this 40 maximum energy shield node in the front. You can get either this one that reduces your energy shield recharge rate or the one that reduces your mana regen rate. Neither of those downsides really matter for us, you just want that 40 flat energy shield. Then, as you may know, Crucible introduced special nodes for most of the active main skills in the game that change how they function in some way or buff them in some way. In this case, this one says, Shield Crush and Spectral Shield Throw don't gain added physical damage based on armor evasion for your shield, so your armor and evasion on the shield don't really matter in terms of your damage. Instead, they now gain 30 to 50, so 40 average added lightning damage per 15 energy shield on your shield. And it converts all of the base damage given by the skill gem into lightning as well. So, when you've got 840 energy shield on your shield, and this can actually go all the way up to 1005 if you really invest heavily into maxing out the nodes that you're combining in your Crucible tree. I've seen some with 1005, I believe that's as high as it can go, so this build could gain even an extra, like, maybe 30%, 35% more damage than I currently have, just by going mega hard into your shield. But I want to go the cheap route. It only cost me about 6 divs total to make this shield, and that's why I said your mileage may vary quite a lot depending on what it takes you to do. You're probably, if you don't just want to spend a lot and buy one, they're really expensive if you want to buy one. What I did, you get a steel kite shield base, preferably get one that already has this 40 flat energy shield. I think that's what I did, but those have also gotten more expensive as more people have found out about this build. But then you're going to do some combining, get another random shield that has this and ideally also the 40 energy shield, level it all the way up so you can allocate both of those nodes and then do Crucible combining and hope that it keeps both of those onto the steel kite shield base, and then you're going to spam Orbs of Chance and Scours. It only took me about 1700. I've been told that that is pretty lucky so far. I've been seeing a lot of people report much higher numbers than that to hit their Emperor's Vigilance, so that is also a big variability in the price of it depending on how many Chance and Scours it takes you. And Chances and Scours might actually be more expensive now since lots of people are starting to chance Crucible uniques. But that's what you want to go for, as much energy shield as you can possibly get, plus the Shield Crush / Spectral Shield Throw node. And then my other nodes here are actually quite useful as well. I've got this, which is just a net positive resistance. I've got some extra AoE because my intelligence is just below 100. And then I've got this one, which is really nice. Gives me 100% reduced reflected elemental damage, so I can run Ellie Reflect no problem. Stack on top of that this new helmet from Crucible. This helmet is special because it can have Crucible trees. It's the only non-weapon / shield item that can have Crucible trees. And I grabbed some flat life at the beginning. That's really nice because you want to have a good life pool. Most of this other stuff in here doesn't really matter at all. But you can also get the weaker version, the 15 to 25 added lightning damage per 15 energy shield on shield. So that's 20 average, your shield was 40 average, so if you can get this on the El Aben's Visage, then that is like another 50% base damage added to you. So again, very, very strong. Those are the things giving us all our base damage. Now, to scale our damage, I decided to go evasion stacking with a Dream Feather. I've got a nice corrupted one here that has AoE and chance to fortify. We hit so hard that even on big bosses, if this procs once, it pretty much gives me my 20 fortify stacks. So you'll see in all of the fights, I pretty much have my fortify running all the time. That's one of many defensive layers that we have sort of working together on this character. Of course, there are probably quite a few useful Crucible nodes that you could get on this as well, but this one's already corrupted, so I can't add a Crucible tree to it or do anything with it, and I really like these implicits, so I didn't worry about it too much. Last unique item we're using, other than Flask, is Call of the Brotherhood here. We go Trinity, and this lets us convert half of the lightning damage that our shield and hat are giving us on Spectral Shield Throw into cold, so we can freeze enemies. That's another nice defensive layer, and it enables the use of Trinity. And you'll see, I think we're still getting something like around 20 to 22% shocks and chills on big bosses. Last one I'm using is Wise Oak, and you'll see in my defenses here, I have actually perfectly balanced fire, cold, and lightning res, all 86 uncapped, meaning we are getting the damage reduction on all 3 elements and the penetration on all 3, though we don't do any fire damage, it's just for cold and lightning. So, as far as other gear goes, it's pretty simple using Dark Rays. I guess that's another unique. I went for a Life Corrupt here. We're a Raider, so we're using lots of Frenzy charges, so you want Dark Ray for 1 more Frenzy charge, and it gives you extra evasion per Frenzy charge as well, which is really good damage scaling, since that's how we're scaling a lot of our damage is with Dream Feather. Rest of our stuff is just capping out the elemental resistances and getting as much life as you can, of course. Got some crit strike chance on the amulet and again more evasion rating. And we need an open suffix on some piece. It doesn't necessarily have to be the ring. Open suffix on some piece. I'm using aspect of the spider for one of my reservations. Get as much evasion as you can. I'm using a chest piece here that's just really fat evasion, and then I'm using the new life mastery node that gives you a 15% increased life if you don't have a life mod on your chest armor. Make sure I corrupted this because that's like the cheapest way to 6-link something in general by using tainted fusing orbs, but make sure that before you corrupt it you get your nice implicits like grace aura effect and generic aura effect. That'll give you a lot of extra evasion. Let's go through our sort of layers of defense here. This character has a number of layers of defense, as I mentioned. Not all of them work together in perfect harmony, but they do all synergize in some way that makes for a pretty well-rounded and tanky character. So at a base level, you won't be able to see it here because I don't have all my charges and everything's up. We get about 125,000 evasion total when we have all our flasks and everything up and all of our frenzy charges. So we have like a 95% chance to evade attacks. So that's our sort of first primary defensive layer, is just evade. Then we have blind as well, both from the flask and nodes on the tree. That is effectively a multiplier on your evasion because it reduces enemy accuracy. So it's very, very rare for us to actually get hit by attacks. Then of course we have capped spell suppression, and we have the 3% mastery and the 3% node on the tree, so we're reducing 56% of incoming spell damage. Then we have my defense here. We've got 74 attack block, don't quite have the full 75, but also capped spell block with glancing blows from Emperor's Vigilance. So 75% of the time we are going to reduce incoming attack and spell hits by 35% damage. As I said, we've got the suppression. Then I've pretty much always got 20 Fortify stacks because of the Fortify Corrupt on this Dream Feather. And then finally, under all of that, we have Ghost Dance. This is one that doesn't synergize perfectly with the blocking because even though you take partial damage when you block with Emperor's Vigilance, that still doesn't proc Ghost Dance. You actually only don't proc Ghost Dance if you don't block and don't evade something. But you'll see in the footage in the background, probably you'll notice that my energy shield sort of works down because with our capped block, when we block, it makes it so the damage does not bypass our energy shield because of this mod on Emperor's Vigilance. So it'll slowly knock our energy shield down as we're blocking stuff, and then occasionally we won't block and won't evade something, and you'll see my energy shield just pop all the way back up to full instantly. That's because of Ghost Dance. We have a ton of evasion, so if we don't block and don't evade something, or we don't block and then we get hit by a spell, which we can't evade, that'll shoot our energy shield right back up to max, and then we have that energy shield pool to work with again for blocking more incoming damage. Also, the extra energy shield pool on top gives us, looks like, about a 6,700 total pool, which is a pretty big pool when you're dealing with dot damage, which you obviously can't block or evade. Those are the defensive layers. As I mentioned, it's sort of defense and offense because Dream Feather gives us damage per 450 evasion rating. Now we'll go through the gem links, I suppose. Our main setup is Divergent Shield Crush. You definitely want the Divergent version. This is part of our damage scaling, gives you crit multi per 100 maximum energy shield on shield. So that's a lot of damage because we have 840 energy shield. We're using multi-strike. You want the Divergent version unless you go all the way to an Awakened multi-strike because Divergent gives extra attack speed, which is nice. You can invest into an Awakened multi-strike if you really want to. Using elemental damage with tax, again, you can invest into an Awakened Wed here if you want. Using Anomalous Inspiration gives us some extra crit strike chance, and I'll show you how we're getting a lot of our crit and crit multi. Using Hypothermia and Trinity, of course. Trinity, very strong support gem. Hypothermia, okay support gem, but it's generic, so you can fit it into pretty much anything. If you weren't going the sub 100 intelligence route like I am, you could do another blue socket instead and then use increased AoE and swap conk effect for single target, but gem swapping's a pain and I really wanted to take advantage of this extra AoE that I happen to get on this node. Our other links, let's see, we've got a Leap Slam with Life Tap and faster attacks. That's what we get around really fast. The main reason I don't use Shield Charge would be faster, of course, for just traversing straight distances, but it can't go over terrain, so I would rather have the Leap Slam. Then we've got a Cast When Damage Taken, Steel Skin, and also Life Tap set up here. And then I'm using Punishment for the Curse on this build. You could use like Ellie Weakness again if you had high intelligence, but I don't because I want to preserve that AoE. And Punishment is pretty darn strong as well. Then over here we've got an Ancestral Protector and War Chief with multiple totems and again Life Tap. We don't have much unreserved mana, so I don't want anything other than Shield Crush using up that unreserved mana pool. Up in the helmet here, we've got a Tempest Shield and Defiance Banner and Grace, all linked to Enlighten to help with the mana reservation a bit. And then finally over here in the shield, we've got a haste. We're not actually using that all the time. It's just for the Vol haste. You could do some of the Uber fights a little more deathless, like the rolling ball phase on Exarch, if you were really good at dodging and instead just put a flame dash in here so you had an instant traversal skill that could get through those flame balls instead of the Vol haste. But I like the Vol haste for bursting stuff down and using to accelerate mapping a little bit. Then we're using a lowish level precision here, just level 8. Helps us cap out our crit and gives us accuracy that we need. And then finally using Blood and Sand gives us AoE when clearing and damage when we are fighting bosses. And then as I mentioned, my last mana reservation thing is Aspect of the Spider. If I press Control, you can see I've got all of my reservation stuff down here in the bottom right except for Blood and Sand because that needs to be toggled between when you are doing bosses. That does it for gem links. For flasks, using a silver flask of the Dove to get Onslaught and then a bunch of extra attack speed during Onslaught. We are of course using a Jade and a Stibnite because we are stacking evasion both for defense and damage. You want a fat % evasion roll on one of your flasks here, and then on the other I've gone with block and stun recovery because we don't have stun immunity and we don't get stunned often, so when we do we just want to make sure we recover from it really quick. As I mentioned, Wise Oak, I've got all 3 of my resistances balanced perfectly, so we're getting full benefit from that. And then I'm using an Eternal Life Flask of Sealing here to deal with Corrupted Blood and Bleed. That does it for the gear. Now we'll go into the passive tree. Again, if you want to check the stuff on this and taking your time, be sure to check out the path of building in the description. So passive tree here, we are a raider, so we're starting as a ranger of course. We go at the top, we grab the Charisma Wheel, which is really nice mana reservation efficiency and effective auras. Here in this dual socket, I've got a Watcher's Eye, and I've just gone with dual precision mods, % attack damage, and gain a flask strike, or a flask will deal a critical strike while affected by precision. This helps us have nice flask sustain even on just like single target boss fights because we are 100% crit, so we're getting lots of flask charges that way. And this build, you get so much crit multi from the gem, the shield, and the shield gem, jewel, and shield mastery. That crit multi really isn't an important thing to go for on your jewels. You're really looking for as much % damage as you can get. Because we have massive crit multi, massive base damage, so we need lots of % damage to really round out and fill out our damage. We go up into the shadow here for some nice attack speed, life, and crit stuff as well. Over to the right, we grab this nice evasion and life wheel, and we're using the evasion mastery for 15% spell suppress because all of our stuff has evasion on it. Over to the right here, again up into the shadow area to get ghost dance, a frenzy charge, some crit and accuracy. This is where we get our leech as well. I have this 10% of leech's instant node. I don't know how much it really helps, but it seemed like it would help, so I've got it for now. This is where my one rare jewel is, and again you want speed and % damage and of course life. I don't think crit multi really is optimal there. I haven't checked that in PoB to know, but it seems like you'd want % damage with how much multi we already have. Down here, I've got the spell suppression wheel and of course the mastery for extra prevented damage. That gets us up to 56% between that and this. More crit stuff, crit multi against unique enemies here. In this area, I am using a Lethal Pride. I'll mention, of course, we get life, and the life mastery I mentioned here, since we have no life on our chest, we can get 15% with that. Over into here for a little block and attack speed, and to cap out our spell suppression completely. Don't need any spell suppression on gear as a raider. Here I'm using a Lethal Pride, as I mentioned. I got this Lethal Pride for only 1 div. You can use the tool in Path of Building to search for good Lethal Prides in this area. This is like significantly better than any rare jewel would be, and was only 1 div, so I went with that. It gives me 4% life here on Forces of Nature. It of course gives me a ton of flat strength on all of these little nodes, which is a good amount of flat life, and means I don't need as much strength on gear to be able to use the Ancestor Totems and Shield Crush and stuff. On Innervate, it gives burning damage, which obviously doesn't do anything for me, but then we get 30 extra crit strike chance here on Heartseeker, which is necessary for capping out. Before I had the Lethal Pride giving me that crit strike chance, instead of this stun recovery, I was using a crit strike chance roll on the Flask here instead. Then we get 5% double damage on Fervor, 5% double damage on Herbalism, and then 20% melee damage on both of these. So really strong lethal Pride there, only cost me 1 div. Hopefully you can find something good if you use the tool in Path of Building. Down here toward the Duelist area, we're grabbing more life. Grab our blind nodes here, plus this blind mastery for crit against blinded enemies. This gives crit against blinded enemies. This gives crit against blinded enemies. This little wheel here is giving us 135% crit chance, which is really big, as well as making it so we blind on hit. Finally, over here all the way into the Duelist, the Mana Mastery here now gives 12% reservation efficiency of skills. That was added in this patch, as they took away some other sources of efficiency for specific Rs, so we definitely want that. Grab the shield nodes for attack speed and damage here, and then this very important Shield Mastery, another 1 crit multi per 10 max energy shield on shield. Then we are grabbing the Frenzy Charge stuff here. Since we're stacking 8 Frenzy Charges, we want as much benefit from that as possible. And Golem's Blood over here, life, and then we are pathing down to Panopticon for that extra buffs from our Ancestor Totems, and then we're using the Totem Mastery that makes it so the buffs linger for 3 seconds after they die. This makes it so that we actually can keep those buffs up pretty reliably even during tough fights where our totems die. Finally here, very important, crucial for the build, you need this. Seething Fury gives offhand critical strike chance and crit multiplier per 10 max energy shield on shield. That combined with those other sources of crit multiplier per energy shield. If I go to offense here, you will see that we have 809% critical multiplier on our offhand. Very, very strong. It says our chance is only 69.52, but if we actually get our inspiration charges up here, it'll go to 76, and then because of Seething Fury as well, our shield has like 17.6% base crit, so the 135% from our blind on blinded enemies totally maxes that out to 100, so we are completely crit capped. Every single hit will be a crit against blinded enemies with our inspiration charges up. I think that pretty well covers it for a passive tree. I will mention that this build I think could also be done well as a champion, as pretty much every attack build could be, and I think a fully optimized champion under optimized conditions would do quite a bit more damage than the Raider, and have probably about the same survivability. It would just be different types of survivability, and you would grab Iron Reflexes and go full armor, and you would use a replica Dream Feather instead of a regular Dream Feather to stack armor for damage. And I think that would be, like I said, an optimized build under optimal conditions, probably stronger than the Raider. However, Raider gives just so much smoothness with the auto frenzy charge generation even on bosses, the super easy to cap spell suppression. I guess I didn't even go through the Raider tree here. We went down the frenzy charge side, gives a ton of damage and evasion and everything. You get 40% spell suppression for free here. You get 50% chance to avoid ailments. We're using Storm Shield so that doesn't, or Tempest Shield, so that doesn't matter for shocks. We have 100% shock avoidance, but it does give us that chance to avoid freeze, and then I've got a little bit of chance to avoid freeze on a belt here, and a little bit of chance to avoid freeze there. So we're freeze immune. We also avoid ignites a good amount of the time as well. And I just think the general smoothness and ease of gearing and quality of play on the Raider more than makes up for whatever optimal damage you'd be losing on the champion. So I think Raider's the best choice, but if you wanted to do this as a champion and armor stack and use a replica Dream Feather, I think that would be a totally viable option as well. We're also getting Fortify all the time from our Dream Feather, so we're not missing out on Fortify from Champion. I really think Raider is the way to go, and that's what I would recommend you do if you want to play the build. Obviously, you can see in the beginning and in the boss fights at the end of this video that damage is really not any kind of an issue for us. So I think Raider's the way to go. Last thing I'll cover here is the Pantheon. I'm using Soul of Arakali for our Major God to get some damage reduced over time and some extra Chaos resistance against damage over time, and then you might as well pick up those other upgrades as well. And then down here I'm using Soul of Urslotha. This makes it so our life flasks are way stronger when we use them on low life, and that's pretty much the only time you use a life flask anyways. And it reduces life regen on enemies you hit with the upgrade there, and gives you life flask charges if you haven't used any recently. I think that's more useful overall than any of these other minor ones. But there might be some arguments to be made for those depending on your general gearing situation and the type of content you were doing. So hopefully I have covered about everything you need to know for this character. Feel free to ask questions in the video comments and I will try to answer them for a while anyways. I hope you liked the video. I will put a bunch of boss fights at the end of the video if you want to see a bunch of boss fights, all the Uber bosses and some Maven invitations and stuff that I've done, and I'll put like the last wave of a simulacrum as well, I guess. So thank you guys for watching. Again, please subscribe, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment if you like this video, and I will see you guys next time.